And this works properly. Let's see. Do I have it on properly? Hang on. There we go. I hit in the wrong direction. Oh, no, there it goes. Okay, haunted houses of Louisville and other ghostly tales. I'll stand over here to the side. I may have mentioned early on that the reason I got into ghosts was I wrote a book on historic houses of Louisville, which also included some historic houses over in southern Indiana. But as I did that, I got some ghost stories from those owners of historic homes, and so that's how this all came about. So now then, do you believe in ghosts? About 50% of the population believes something strange is happening. What creates a ghost? Trauma experience, murder, accidental death, or their burial location is disturbed. That's a big one. Or the ghost is just hanging around in this world. He's trapped in this world, doesn't know how to get out. How do ghosts appear? There's a variety of ways. Apparitions, cold spots, unexplained noises, shadows, orbs, and strange electrical malfunctions. Oh, God. Oh, do we have a ghost in here? Okay. Thank you over there who's controlling the lights. That's one of the secrets I was talking about. There we go. I thought that would add it to the enjoyment, I would hope. Some of you may have been on ghost tours around the country, as I have. I've been on almost every ghost tour there is around the country, and they say New Orleans is the most haunted city. I've been there, took their tours. I didn't find anything fascinating other than the tours always would go through gift shops and taverns, and souvenir places. I thought, well, something's up with this. But I feel that Savannah has the most ghost-tingling, spine-tingling ghost tales. A lot of that has to do with their old cemetery, which was in the center of downtown. And as the city grew, they needed that space, and so they relocated everyone and they built around it. Here are some of their ghost tour and things that they do. Do you think they got everyone out when they relocated that cemetery? Well, not exactly. And in fact, if you take those Savannah ghost tours, when you walk around that block, you can definitely tell something weird's happening to that one block. People move in, move out, and all. They've had a lot of issues with that one block where the old cemetery was located. We have a same situation here over on the shady side of town in Louisville. Baxter Square Park used to be a cemetery. It was known as the Pioneer Cemetery. You can see where it was located there on the western edge of downtown. And Mayor Baxter back then wanted a park, and so he ordered all those ordered all of the descendants who had burials in that cemetery to move everyone out, so he can create the park. Do you think they got everyone out? Well, John Keats, the famous English poet, his brother George Keats moved to Louisville, and he lived at the Englishman's Palace there in the lower left-hand corner in downtown Louisville. It's long been demolished, unfortunately. But anyways, George Keats had a daughter named Rosalind Keats. She died at a young age. She was about 5 years old when she died of a childhood illness. In Louisville, it's probably in New Albany. You had mosquito-borne illnesses, yellow fever, malaria, and all. Young children were susceptible to a lot of illnesses. So Rosalind passed away when she was 5 years old and was buried there in the Pioneer Cemetery. And when they relocated everyone, they could not find Rosalind Keats there. She did not come along, as it says in the lower right-hand corner. So now, people have said they've heard children's voices playing on the playground equipment there at the park. And there's buildings around the park area that have strange things happening there. I know one specific building that had a medium come in to talk to the ghost, to try to get the ghost out of this building because they were having all sorts of issues with it. But anyways, yeah, Baxter Square Park, very similar to what was happening in Savannah. Are there ghosts in cemeteries? I hear this a lot. Here's Cave Hill Cemetery. I was a docent at Cave Hill for 17 years. I do know where the bodies are buried there at Cave Hill. So I would ask the night watchman, I said, have you ever seen ghosts here? They go, why would ghosts be in the cemetery? Scaring other ghosts? No, they want to be out scaring you, the living. So no, the night watchmen, according to them, have never seen a ghost there at Cave Hill. We do have some scary monuments and things happening there. Colonel Sanders had a haunting experience there once. Oh, if I can get this right. There he is. He's visiting his grave site. There is a ghost. And so there's the colonel. I think it's kind of haunting when you visit your own grave site as such. And I'll tell you another one of my tales of Cave Hill. Colonel Sanders was buried the traditional way. He was not cremated, or else he'd be extra crispy. No, you don't like that one either. But I did take this one photograph here of Harry Collins. He's the famous magician of Louisville. He worked for Frito-Lay during the day, but he did magic tricks in the evening on Crusade for Children and things like that. He was the mentor to Lance Burton, the famous Las Vegas magician from Louisville. And photographers say that orbs are created by dust reflecting off the lens of cameras. But ghostologists claim that orbs are spirits. And when I took this photograph of Harry Collins, I had 2 orbs within it. And I have taken hundreds, maybe thousands of photographs of Cave Hill, and this is the only photograph that ever had orbs within it. So maybe Harry's sending something there from beyond. Eastern Cemetery, which is right next to Cave Hill over in Louisville, they have a history of reburials. Again, you don't disturb the dead. Cave Hill, I mean not Cave Hill, but Eastern Cemetery has the same number of people buried there as in Cave Hill. Cave Hill has about 135,000 buried there. They claim Eastern has the same amount buried there. But Eastern is 1/10 the size of Cave Hill. It's 30 acres of land. Cave Hill is 300 acres of land. So how did they get as many folks within 30 acres of land? Well, you don't really want to know, but yeah, it was not a good situation back in the 1970s when they found all this out. So Eastern Cemetery also might have had some grave robbers going on there also. What Louisville institution has a history of grave robbing? Y'all should know this, because they came over here to do it. U of L. So James Guthrie, the famous civic booster of Louisville, convinced the medical faculty over in Transylvania University in Lexington to come to Louisville as part of the medical school here, because we had more bodies to experiment on. And I understand Fairview Cemetery might have had some U of L students rummaging around back in the day. So I'm not sure if you all have any stories on that or not, but that's what I've heard. So now then, U of L does have several people buried on its campus. There are 2 folks that I'm aware of. And there we go. Louis Brandeis, the famous Supreme Court Justice, and his wife Alice is buried just to the right of the main entrance of the School of Law. They were both cremated there. They got really burned up about it, though, I understand. No? Okay. Keep moving. We named our parks after the Native Americans that lived in this area. So where are all the Native Americans buried here in our region? So most of them are buried in Indian mounds. I know a lot of them are buried along the riverbank as well, but most of them buried in mounds. And so where are the mounds in this area? So there was a famous one in downtown Louisville where that red star is. There was a huge mound, and then just north of it was a lake. And again, as I noted earlier about children susceptible to mosquito-borne illnesses, and back in the 1830s, the Louisvillians decided to get rid of that standing water there at the lake to get rid of the mosquitoes. So how do you think creatively they did that? Well, they took all the contents of that mound and pushed it into that lake. And that's what's there today. There's a parking lot where the mound was, and a State of Kentucky Human Resources building where the lake is. And I have talked to staff there in the Human Resources building, and they do agree that there are some strange things that do happen there. Now then, on another matter, the Denver airport is said to be the most haunted airport in the United States. It's also the largest, I think it was 50 square miles in area. And if you recall, when it opened up, the baggage claim system did not operate properly. So they're saying that when they built the airport, they disturbed a lot of Native American burial locations. In fact, there's a website out there that talks about all the hauntings that go on out there. And we here at Louisville also have a similar situation, where Muhammad Ali International Airport is the site of it once a major Native American village site here. And here are the archaeologists doing a dig there back in the 1970s. So here's an aerial view of the airport. And if you look real close, you see a round sort of green spot. That is an Native American ceremonial location. I'm not sure if there's a burial there or not, but they preserved it, and the UPS planes have to taxi around it. As noted earlier, I was a docent at Cave Hill Cemetery, and we did twilight tours in this sort of wagon hay wagon that we pull around. And so I would stop at that Harry Collins magician site to tell my ghost stories. And so after I told my ghost stories, I would ask those on the trip, on the journey there, if they had a ghost story. Well, an owner of a farm in southern Indiana told me of their haunting experience. In fact, they didn't want to say it at all. And when I asked for my folks on the tour to tell their ghost stories, the woman kept elbowing her husband, saying, "You got to tell the story, you got to tell the story," and we all convinced him to do so. So here's what he said. They were building a tennis court there on their farm, and all sorts of weird things were happening in their house. Electrical malfunctions, the kids saw apparitions, they would put dogs in cages at night, and the dogs mysteriously got out of their cages and roamed around. So they had all sorts of things happening. So they got a medium to come out to the farm to find out what was going on. She went out to into the farm area and then came back into the house and told the farm couple, "You need to go out and talk to the tribe and tell them you're not disturbing their village out there." And they're like, "Well, okay." So the husband went out and said, "We're building a tennis court, we mean you no harm, blah, blah, blah." And after that, everything quieted down and they saw nothing else. So they had a Native American burial site evidently on their farm. We still have some mounds around Louisville. Here's one out near the Prospect area. So how do you get rid of ghosts? You call the Ghostbusters, right? So one time I saw a ghostmobile downtown. It was interesting. Of course, the star of that was Bill Murray. And he also was the star of Stripes, which was filmed in downtown Louisville. A number of the scenes there were done at the Silbach Hotel. And the Silbach has our most famous ghost, the Lady in Blue. Who is the Lady in Blue? Her name is Patricia Wilson. Her body was found at the bottom of an elevator shaft there. We do not know how she died, whether it was a murder or an accidental death or a suicide. No one ever was charged with her death. But she's been floating about the Silbach ever since. Numerous people have seen her down there. I've heard tons of stories about the Lady in Blue down at the Silbach. In fact, the Silbach likes to troll the guest at the hotel. They put a Lady in Blue portrait up by the elevators there on the mezzanine level. And I know of a former concierge at the Silbach who has told me numerous times about the middle-aged men that would come running down in the middle of the night talking about the Lady in Blue up in their hotel room. I always said, well, I think they were concocting a story for their wives back home as to why a Lady in Blue was up in their hotel room. But I'll leave it up to your thing. A number of years ago, I wrote another book, history of my church over in Louisville, St. Francis of Rome. I actually used a ghostwriter on the book. Charles Beckman, he passed away in the early 1960s, but he did a lot of oral histories of the parishioners, and so I used a lot of that within the book, so I thought I'd give him ghostwriter credit for my book. And in so doing, we took photographs to include in the book, and we did photographs like this. This was a midnight mass at Christmas, but I could not use this photo. If you look real closely, you see all the orbs that were floating about. Why wouldn't a ghost be there at midnight Christmas mass? Likewise, with Father Jerry Eifler here, he had orbs floating about him. But the most ghostly story, as I was doing the book, the parishioners kept asking me if I'm going to talk about the ghost of St. Francis of Rome in this book. And I said, what's that? So here's the story. They had the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth as the nuns there at the old school. And one of them boarded a Piedmont airliner in August of 1968, took off from Louisville, flew to Charleston, West Virginia. If you're familiar with that airport, it's up on a mountain. Back then, navigational instruments weren't that good on airliners. It was all fogged in. The pilots misjudged the runway, slammed into the side of the mountain, killing all aboard, including Sister Francis from, let me get the right button here. There we go, Sister Francis there on August 10th, 1968. And parishioners ever since have been seeing her pushing a broom around the old school building there at St. Francis of Rome. This is her grave site there at near Bardstown, Kentucky, at the campus there. Now if you go down in downtown Louisville, where 4th Street Live is, that used to be the Prather family home site, Prather Square it was called. And Thomas Prather was originally buried there. They have a family cemetery on the site. Now he's buried. They relocated him out at Cave Hill. Do you think they got everyone out? Well, if you go down at 4th Street Live around 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, you might see some strange characters roaming about. By the way, Broadway was once called Prather Street. History there. We also have folks buried in the basement there of the Cathedral of the Assumption, several bishops. To my knowledge, the cathedral is not haunted. I've not heard of any ghostly tales there. The Palace Theater, they say, is haunted, and the Belle of Louisville likewise. Again, any tourist attraction, when they start talking about ghosts, well, you just take that with a grain of salt. Well, of course, the Silbach has a ghost, so let's talk about the Brown Hotel. They say that J. Graham Brown roams the halls there. He actually lived in the Brown Hotel, but I can't really verify that. But he was the philanthropist that helped fund the Louisville Zoo, the Brown Cancer Center, and the Kentucky Derby Museum. To my knowledge, no ghosts at those locations. The Brennan House in downtown Louisville at 5th and Chestnut. Thomas and Anna Brennan, they had 7 children, but their children had no children, which meant that all of their possessions from the 1800s and 1900s are still there in the house. It's sort of a time capsule of Louisville history. All of their Victorian books and furniture and things, clothing is still there in that old house. The last Brennan died in the early 1960s. It's him, Dr. Thomas Brennan. There's all the Brennans that are buried in Cave Hill. Now it says on a moonlit night, you might see shadows up on the 2nd floor as they return to visit all their earthly possessions. So if you look up there in that window, oops, wait a minute, let me go back to it. I've got to go back, hang on. There she is. I got it. I get it right. Okay, well, whatever. She's up in the window there. Out in Jeffersontown, they had the Blankenbaker house, and they say that a elderly woman is seen sitting on the front porch there in a black dress. This is an interesting one. Out in Middletown, Kentucky, the Joseph Abel house, they say his ghost protects his buried treasure that's there on the property. Now, don't go out there with a metal detector anytime soon. I know a lot of people have been out there looking for the buried treasure, but not sure about the ghost either, but it's a tall tale we hear a lot. Almost every bed and breakfast or Airbnb has a ghost. If you've ever stayed in one of these locations, you know they have ghosts on their websites talk about them. The Samuel Bray House in particular, which is out there off Bashford Manor Lane off Bardstown Road. And they have a lot of Civil War ghosts. The Union camped out there on the property of the Bashford Manor Bed and Breakfast. Here is one that's right across the river here on Northwestern Parkway. I talked to this former owner of this house here. They started having renovations there in the house, and strange things started to happen. Their grandfather clock would continually start and stop. Their father-in-law came to visit in the upstairs bedroom. The luggage was not yet opened. He went up to the room and it had been opened and all the contents scattered about. And the next door neighbors would see a woman peering out of the windows. And all the strange things stopped once the renovations stopped. They think it was Mrs. Mary Ann McCalkin, who was a spinster and died in this house. Here we go. Culberson Mansion. I think it may be the most haunted house in the region. I've talked to a number of staff and visitors there who have seen strange things at the Culberson. In fact, I gave this talk a year ago, and I don't think, do we have anyone from the Culberson here in the audience today?
I worked there when I was in college.
Oh, okay, a while back. Well, anyways, the executive director was in the audience a year ago when I gave this talk, and she got up and talked about her experiences with the ghost there at the Culberson. So here is some of the stories, you name it, all the ghostly happenings happen there at the Culberson. It's a beautiful hotel, mansion, and I just heard that it almost got demolished. Oh my gosh, can you imagine this, that it got demolished? But anyways, there's the Culberson, beautiful historic landmark. Some nice haunting photographs. And of course, I think they still do the haunted house and the carriage house. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they do. But they raise a lot of money for the maintenance of the Culberson. They actually have a website up there that I stumbled across that scared me to death in reading about all this, but it was just fictitious tales of ghosts there at the Culberson. Conrad Seton House, this is in Jefferson Town as well. Everything and anything happens here in this house. It's now a business location, but it was a former house. A tenant of this historic house told me a variety of tales that happened there. They saw shadowy figurines within the house, and you can kind of read what's going on there, just some strange things happening. They had a book flying across off the bookcase. I had a guy standing out looking out at the cemetery next door. The cemetery next door has the lady in white walking through it. So a lot of mysterious things happening at the Conrad Seton House in Jefferson Town. And then my friend who has a business in this building, she was there one this dark and stormy night and heard footsteps throughout the house. And then finally there were loud thumps up in the attic above her, and she decided to leave at that time. And then they had a Boy Scout troop come through, and they had a magic 8-ball that would give answers, if you will, about you ask it things, it would come up with an answer. And one of them was, do you have a ghost here? And if you do, what's the name? And it came up with the name of Daniel, and Daniel was a person that was connected to this house. So I'll let you decide how correct that might be, but it was very coincidental. The Peterson Dumino house, which I know very well. The story here is that the children that get lost on the property in the Crescent Hill neighborhood sometimes wander onto the property of the Peterson Dumino house, and a lady in white comes out of the house, takes the child by the hand, puts him or her up on the steps, and tells the child the mother would be there shortly to find the child. And then the lady in white would go back into the house. One tale is that when the mother did come get the child, as they were leaving, all the lights in the house, which had been on, suddenly turned off. So who is this lady in white? So I have lived in the Crescent Hill neighborhood for about 45 years, always heard the story on the lady in white, so I decided, but did not know of any tragic death or anything that would have created a ghost there at the PD house. So as a historian, decided to research it somewhat, so I went to the Peterson gravesite in Cave Hill Cemetery, where Joseph Peterson, who built the house, and his wife Caroline are buried. And Joseph and Caroline had two granddaughters, Eliza and Carrie. Their father was Jacob Lindenberger. So, but who was their mother? Who was the daughter of Joseph and Caroline, who was the mother to the two granddaughters, Eliza and Carrie? Who was that? Who was she? So here's the gravesite at Cave Hill. So on the left is Jacob Lindenberger, who's the father of Eliza and Carrie. And in the back is Carrie Peterson Lindenberger, Eliza and Carrie's mother. So again, Carrie Peterson was the daughter of Joseph and Caroline down below, and she had two daughters, Eliza and Carrie. There will be a quiz on this later on. So this is Carrie Peterson Lindenberger's headstone. You can hardly read it and all. So now I wanted to find out more about Carrie Peterson Lindenberger. And if you ever go to the Cave Hill website, it's got a search engine on it. I always tell people to put in the last name, because you don't know what the first name might be. They might be using their middle name or a nickname or something else. Just put in the last name. It comes up with all the various Lindenbergers, and you kind of search through there as to which one you're looking for. So I was looking for Carrie Lindenberger. You can see her there at the very top. She passed away in October of 1866. So I said, well, let's start looking here. I noticed another Jacob Lindenberger, August 24th, 1866, just a few weeks prior to Carrie's death. I kept looking. I found another Lindenberger, a Richard Lindenberger, also on the same date as Jacob, and Thomas, the same date as Richard and Jacob. So there are three people buried on the same date, known as Lindenbergers, there in the Peterson family plot. And so I called the Cave Hill office up and said, what are the ages of Jacob, Richard, and Thomas? They were all infants. So I guess that she had died of triplets there at birth. So Carrie Peterson Lindenberger, in my mind, is the lady in white. Now then, more stories about the lady in white. The 1974 tornado missed the Peterson Dumino house by 1 block, or else it would have been demolished. A lightning strike recently knocked out all the electrical at the house, but did not cause a fire. An electrician working in the upstairs ceiling fan was spooked and left and would not come back. A visitor at our July 4th festival claimed she saw the lady in white up on the staircase. And during the Louisville Historical League board meeting, we all saw a flash of white go through the living room. It was at 8 p.m. at night, and we all saw it. We're all looking at each other like, what was that? We all got up and looked about to see what could have created that, but did not see anything. Let me make sure I get this right. And just recently, a very large tree fell over in a storm, and it fell away from the house. It could have very easily have fallen into the house and severely damaged it, but it fell away from the house. So perhaps the lady in white is protecting this historic house. On the street next door to us, there on Gault Avenue, the residents all have various ghostly tales. I won't go through all of these, but a number of the residents have seen ghosts in the area. Here are some haunting photographs of the interior of the PD house. And the ghost is there, if I get this right. The lights are on, she's there. Now then, one last thing about the PD house. Frankfort Avenue in Crescent Hill had all these beautiful mansions that lined the street there. They've all since been demolished in one. They had fires and tornadoes, various things that tore up all these beautiful mansions, except for one, the Peterson Dumino house. And thus we think that the lady in white protects that house. So you can still see the lady in white here on the weekends. So there it is, there she goes. Waverly Hills, they say, is the most haunted place here in the Louisville area. Ghost capital of America, they say. They have a number of haunting tales going on there. Of course, there's an old tuberculosis sanitarium. There's where it's located there in southwest Jefferson County. Nunlea, another historic house out in the Jeffersontown area of Louisville, Hurstburn Parkway and Tellersville Road area. They have various sightings of Harriet Funk, who once owned the house. And Haunted Kentucky, Terry Grimes came to Nunlea and did a ghost hunting there at the place and saw all sorts of weird things going on. And the slave quarters in back of Nunlea is now the police department, and even they have tales of ghosts in their area also. So police are documenting ghosts at Nunlea. Various things here. Now, the ghost hunters, they use a thing called EVP, electronic voice phenomena, and various gadgets to sense ghosts. And in the lower left-hand corner there is supposedly a view of the ghost. The ghost is going through a black bag that the ghost hunters had there on site, and you can kind of see a hand in the black bag there. That's what they say. I'll let you decide what's happening there. The most noted ghost hunter in the area is Keith Age. He does a lot of ghost hunting. He has a website, talks about his adventures. New York City has its own Ghostbuster. Now then, I know a Catholic priest, and he was telling me not long ago that he was invited out to a senior living facility. It was not in Louisville, it was out in rural Kentucky, and the residents there would not enter one of the rooms at the senior facility. They claimed strange things were going on inside that room. So they called out this Catholic priest to conduct an exorcism of that room. And so I've since learned that they have a special prayer that they recite. They spring holy water and a cross and all that. It was more dramatic there in The Exorcist movie, of course, but he was telling me, and he's not heard back from them, so he thinks it worked. They've not called him back to do another exorcism. So again, the residents there claim there was a ghost in their senior facility. There's been a lot of books written on hauntings and ghosts in the area. There's my book there in the lower right-hand corner. We have a lot of ghost walks ourselves in the Louisville area. Then y'all may have one in here in New Albany, I would guess. Almost every community has a ghost walk. We had a zombie walk. They had one recently over in the Nulu district. Boo at the Zoo. It's a fun event. And I'm looking forward to this Friday. Jude Redfield of the WDRB always dresses up like you see there. He wears a green suit up against his weather forecast. It's hysterical when he does this. And there's a book, a magazine that I bought recently called Haunted Houses and Scary Mysteries. However, there is not one local haunted house in this book. No Waverly Hills, no Silbach, no Culberson Mansion, so I take that with a grain of salt as well. But yeah, they did not mention the Silbach or anything. So they did mention all these scary movies, and my favorite scary movie is Sleepy Hollow. That's a great, with Johnny Depp and all that. It's a great movie. And I don't know why they don't run that on Halloween. It is on cable. It's on the FX channel, which I do not get. It's on this Thursday, in fact, October 30th. Sleepy Hollow is running several times on the FX channel, which I do not get. But anyway, Sleepy Hollow, great movie.
I think it's available for free on YouTube, as it was a few days ago.
Oh,
I'm obsessed with
wow.
Sleepy Hollow. I watched it.
Thank you. I'm going to check that out.
I think it's at a festival in my hometown. Had nothing to do with it, but it was called Sleepy Hollow, so I had to go.
I've got to find out why.
So try
why-
YouTube. There's
would
also a
think.
Jeff Goldblum version in the 1980s, the
Mhm.
Disney version. There's several like visual books, all kinds of stuff. I've
So I'll
looked
look
at a
into
lot of them.
that. And of course, we have distilleries now in Bourbon and all. Of course, we had to have a haunted distillery down on Main Street here. And by the way, when I was giving this talk the other day, and one of the co-owners of this distillery was in the audience, and she talked about the hauntings at this distillery as well. So she does have some good stories about Buzzard's Roost Distillery down on West Main Street. Now then, most of you may not have seen a ghost. I'm not sure if you have or not. Now, I've not seen a ghost, even though I've been, it seems, all around these things. But I do believe most people have had paranormal experiences. I've had several. Paranormal is something that happens which is impossible to explain by known natural forces or by science. So I'll give you two good examples of this. I was recently out at Yellowstone National Park doing a hiking trip with my wife, had a great time, and there was one specific souvenir that I wanted. So I went to several gift shops, they did not have it, and then I decided, I told my wife, okay, one more gift shop, that's it, I'll look at this one location at the Old Faithful General Store to see if I can find it, and sure enough they had what I was looking for. So I found it there, and went up to the cashier to pay for it, and she was a chatty cashier, you may have come across these. She's talking to everything about anything, and the line was real long, and I didn't want to wait. My wife's out in the car waiting for me. I got to get going, so I went to the scanning machine, and the barcode on the souvenir would not work. I said, oh geez, this is crazy. So I had to go to had to wait in line for the chatty cashier. So I went up there, finally got to talk to her, and she goes, where are you from? I go, Louisville, Kentucky. She looked at me amazed and said, my son just painted a mural in Louisville of a murdered rock singer. She now had my full attention. Since I was preparing a talk on notorious crimes in Louisville that I would give the following week. So I learned, I said, oh, this is interesting, tell me more. So I asked her the name of the rock singer. She muttered some things I didn't quite understand. She pulled out her cell phone, and on the left, she showed me the rock singer photograph, and then she showed me the mural that her son had just painted the week previous in Louisville. Mia Zappa. Does anyone know who Mia Zappa is?
Zapata.
Yes, she was in a band called The Gits.
That is correct. And so Mia Zappa, never heard of her. Upon returning to Louisville, I got into Google and everything, find out more about her career. I included her in my Notorious Crimes of Louisville talk the next week. Several people in the audience knew of her, and like you said, knew of the Gits band and all that. So it was a strange series of events that led me to all of this. Here's more information about her. What's very fascinating is she was murdered in Seattle in 1993. They did not solve her murder for another 10 years in 2003. She was one of the first cases ever decided by DNA evidence. They had kept DNA from her in 1993, and they found this guy that abused her back in 2003. She's noted as one of the first in the United States being solved. I've seen it where she was the first, but she wasn't the first. Actually, England was using DNA evidence prior to us. But anyways, Mia Zappa, so they did fine. She went to Presentation Academy. She's buried in Cave Hill Cemetery, and there's her photo there. So very strange series of events out in Yellowstone. Who would have thought it, to learn about this person. The next paranormal is Sam Thomas, noted historian of Louisville, wrote many books of Louisville. And so when he died in 2012 of cancer, I was over in Italy, and Could not get back for the memorial service. When I got back, I contacted Debbie, the upper left-hand corner there. Said, gosh, Debbie, I was out of town, couldn't make it to the visitation, sorry about that. I said, was there a book that Sam had written but had not yet published? She goes, yes, there is one ready to go to the printer now, but I have no money to pay for it. I told her, okay, well, I will think about it. A few days later, I get a call from a very wealthy Louisvillian to talk some history. And at the end of the discussion, he says, hey, I'm getting ready to write a book on the origins of the Olmsted Park system in Louisville. And I said, whoa, time out. Sam has already written this book, and I put him in contact with Debbie. And the book got published in 2013, The Origins of Louisville Olmsted Parks and Parkways, and I got to write the book review in the Courier-Journal. Now, was Sam up there somehow mysteriously orchestrating how all this came about? I just happened to be out of town, just happened to mention to Debbie about another book, just happened that a wealthy Louisvillian would call me on this. All that was very coincidental, would you think? But it was interesting, and unfortunately it got done. So now then, all of these ghosts and hauntings I've been mentioning have been friendly ghosts. No one has ever been injured by a ghost or anything of this nature, so I'm not particularly concerned about this, even though we're frightened by these things, but there are no ghosts. So has anyone here seen a ghost? Yes, if you would like to say. And by the way, we're all friends here. At my last talk, most of the room wanted to talk about their ghost. So, it is, yes.
Well, two, and I'll try to make them both quick. And my name is Rita Spalding, and it's very nice to meet you in person, Steve.
Okay, great.
The first is the Brennan House is one of my favorite places. It's very understated. A lot of people don't even know about it. I worked close to it when I worked at 4th and Broadway. So I went in, made an appointment on my lunch break to go with a friend, and we were the only two people touring the house at that time. Absolutely gorgeous. Most of the belongings, or maybe all of them, were of the Brennans. We're going through the house, and I'm on the, can't remember if it was the first or second floor. I think it was the first floor. But I started to smell cigar smoke. And looking around, because I'm thinking, well, we're the only ones here. And so Henrietta Williams, the lady that was with me, I looked at her and I said, do you smell? And she said, cigar smoke. And I said, yes. So I asked the woman, I said, is there somebody else here? Because both of us smell cigar smoke. And she said, not that I am aware of. However, many people come through here and say that they smell cigar smoke, and Dr. Brennan smoked cigars. So that was pretty cool. And the other thing is that I lived in a historic district in the Highlands, in the Cherokee Triangle, and I had a house there, and a lot of different things happened. But one of the things that happened was there was a landing between the living room and the kitchen, and as I was walking in the living room, I saw what looked like it looked like a small tornado, like a gray, wispy thing in a semicircle. And I walked into the living room and I turned, and my husband at the time was in the kitchen, and he looked at me and he said, did you see the gray being on the stairway? So we both saw it at the same time, and we had a lot of unexplained things happening there. It was owned by Judge John Poston and his two sisters.
Oh. Well, that's good. And again, I said I've not seen a ghost, but I did see that white flash at the Peterson Dumino house. So something strange, like you say, is happening, and they smell a lot of cigar smoke at the Culberson, I understand, as well. Any other comments on that? Well, don't want to keep y'all too late here. The ball game's getting ready to start. Where do you go see dead people tonight? Hillcrest Avenue. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with Hillcrest Avenue, but You just take I-64 over to Zorn Avenue, take Zorn up the hill. Zorn turns into Hillcrest Avenue. You don't make any turns, you just keep going straight on the Hillcrest. And it is a treat this year. Over 50 houses are now decorated. It is amazing. It's really great this year. Here are some photographs of it during the day, but it's best at night. And this year, they're closing down Hillcrest. They used to keep it open for automobiles, which was very dangerous. I mean, you get hundreds of kids on this thing. So they're closing it down, so you have to park around Hillcrest for Halloween. But it's going to be very cool. I live within a block of Hillcrest, and this is my house. And it's lit up right now as I'm talking here. But we put a big pumpkin there. To paraphrase the Cowardly Lion, now do you believe in ghosts? Boo. Thanks for attending. Any questions? And by the way, I did bring some of my haunted house books. I didn't market them properly, but they're $5 if anyone's interested in any copies. I do have some here this evening. But anyways, I thank y'all very much for attending.